They wanted to blow up the moon, not explore it, not land on it, erase a piece of the night sky. In the late 1950s, fear ruled the world. United States and Soviet Union stared at each other through the crosshairs of annihilation. It was the age of the Cold War, when silence hummed with the threat of mushroom clouds, and school children hid under desks practicing for a nuclear sunrise that might never come. And then came Sputnik. October 4th, 1957, a beeping metal sphere crossed the heavens, and the Western world felt its heart stop. The Soviet Union had touched space first. In the corridors of the Pentagon, that beep was heard as a war cry. The United States Air Force feared they had lost the high ground forever. If Moscow could put a radio into orbit, they could soon place bombs, cameras, maybe even soldiers. The American public looked up at the cold glint of Sputnik and saw their own graves reflected back. America needed something spectacular, something that could erase the shame, prove supremacy, and terrify their enemies. And someone in that smoke-choked war room said the unthinkable. "What if," they whispered, "we nuked the moon?" The logic was as warped as it was simple. A detonation visible from Earth, a brilliant flash across the lunar surface so bright it would be seen by millions of naked eyes. A cosmic fireworks show, and a warning. The United States could strike anywhere, even the heavens. The project got a name, Project A119. Its purpose? To create a nuclear explosion on the moon, visible from Earth, to demonstrate U.S. technological might. It sounds like madness. It was, but it was also real. A small team of scientists was assembled, young, brilliant, and sworn to silence. Among them, a 24-year-old graduate student who would later become a household name, Carl Sagan. Sagan's task was chilling. Calculate how far the dust cloud from a nuclear blast would rise off the lunar surface, and how bright the flash would appear from Earth. If the show wasn't spectacular enough, the plan would be scrapped. In secret rooms at the Illinois Institute of Technology, they plotted how to launch a W-25 nuclear warhead on a Thor missile straight at the moon. The warhead was small, only 1.7 kilotons, barely a tenth of Hiroshima bombing, but enough to make the lunar surface bloom with atomic fire. They planned for a strike at the Terminator line, the shadowed edge between lunar day and night, so the explosion would stand out against the blackness of space like a sun ripping through the dark. This was not science. It was theater. Nuclear theater. And while the public watched the skies in wonder, none knew that in a locked office, men were seriously planning to scour the moon just to prove they could. But behind the bravado, there was fear. Fear that if they failed, the warhead might miss and fall back to Earth. Fear that the blast might kick up too much dust, obscuring the moon for years. Fear that if they hit too hard, they might fracture it. Even the moon was not safe from the madness of men. And so, as the 1960s dawned, the world watched the moon with innocent wonder, never knowing that in the shadows, America was aiming a gun at it. But secrets can't stay buried forever. And the plan to nuke the moon was about to come horrifyingly close to reality. The documents were marked top secret. They spoke not of exploration, but annihilation. In the spring of 1958, the United States Air Force gave full backing to Project A119. They weren't alone. ARPA, now DARPA, quietly funneled money through shell programs, keeping the project buried from Congress and the press. They built scenarios, calculations, contingency plans. How to launch, how to detonate, how to explain it to the world afterward. Sagan and his fellow scientists were forbidden to speak of their work. In windowless rooms, they debated trajectories and fallout patterns. How fast the rocket must travel. 9,000 meters per second. How to ensure it struck the surface rather than skimming past into deep space. Every detail mattered. There would be no second chance. In classified memos, they even discussed using a hydrogen bomb instead of a small atomic device, a megaton-class weapon that could blast a crater a mile wide. Cooler heads barely prevailed. A miscalculation could shatter the moon's delicate balance, altering tides and destabilizing Earth's orbit. But the military men didn't care about tides. They cared about theater. Their plan scheduled the detonation on a clear night when much of the world could see the moon. Have television cameras ready. Let the glow of American might burn across the heavens. But while they schemed, the world shifted beneath their feet. In January 1959, the Soviet Union launched Luna 1, the first spacecraft to escape Earth's gravity. It missed the moon by 6,000 kilometers, but proved they could get there. In September, Luna 2 didn't miss. It struck the moon's surface and left behind a metal pennant bearing the hammer and sickle. It was a humiliation for the United States. The Soviets had touched the moon first. And so, Project A119 accelerated. The pressure to strike, to do something, became suffocating. Yet doubts grew. Quiet ones, dangerous ones. What if the blast went wrong and sent radioactive debris raining back to Earth? What if the world reacted with horror instead of awe? What if history remembered not American triumph, but American madness? In a rare moment of hesitation, a few scientists whispered what none dared say aloud. We are risking humanity's future for a publicity stunt. But the men in uniform weren't listening. They were already building the rocket. Cape Canaveral, 1959. The launch pad blazed under floodlights as crews assembled the Thor missile in silence. Welders sealed the fuel lines. Engineers checked the gyroscopes. A warhead the size of a trash can, a W-25 nuclear warhead, waited in a guarded bunker, destined for the moon. It was almost ready. The plan was no longer theory. Security was absolute. Workers signed oaths, phones were confiscated, and guards patrolled the perimeter with dogs. To the outside world, it was just another test. But inside the fences, they were preparing the first interplanetary act of war. As the launch date neared, the weather turned. Storms clawed the coastline. Lightning forked over the ocean like warning signs from the gods. Still, the countdown marched forward. One night, as Sagan reviewed the impact models, he froze. A column of figures didn't add up. The dust plume could rise higher than anyone expected, high enough to escape lunar gravity. Microscopic particles of irradiated glass could drift through space for centuries, invisible and lethal, a radioactive haze around the moon. He brought the data to his superiors. They told him to stay quiet. In the final briefing, an Air Force general stood at the front of the room, his voice like gravel. "Gentlemen, this is how we show the world who owns the future." No one breathed. No one spoke. Then came the order. Proceed to final assembly. But just hours before the launch window opened, the world changed again. NASA was born. In July 1958, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed the act that created the Civilian Space Agency, and by late 1959, it had begun absorbing projects from the military. NASA's mission was peaceful exploration. And when its new leaders learned of A119, they were horrified. One memo described the plan as deeply damaging to America's reputation. Another warned it could trigger an international ban on space exploration entirely. And then, without fanfare, without headlines, Project A119 was killed. The rocket never launched. The moon was spared. The files were locked away, buried under decades of dust and denial. But some secrets don't stay dead. For 40 years, no one knew. Project A119 vanished into rumor and myth. Carl Sagan went on to become a beloved scientist, never breathing a word about his part in planning a lunar nuclear strike. The military men retired in silence. The paper trail disappeared until 2000. That year, physicist Leonard Riefel, who had led the study, finally broke the silence. In interviews, he confirmed everything: the secret team, the launch plans, the warhead aimed at the moon. The world was stunned. Headlines screamed, "U.S. planned to nuke the moon." It sounded like satire. It wasn't. Riefel admitted he had regrets. He said he feared what might have happened if they had gone through with it. How the radioactive dust might have poisoned space exploration forever. How the moon might have been scarred for eternity. And yet, he said, at the time, it felt necessary, because in the Cold War, fear ruled everything. It's easy to laugh now, to shake our heads and say, what were they thinking? But imagine it, a single flash in the sky, bright enough to cast shadows on Earth, the moon wounded by human hands, the tides shifting, the world cheering or screaming. It could have happened. It almost did. Instead, the moon remained silent, untouched. And maybe that's the real miracle, because Project A119 shows us something terrifying and hopeful. It shows how far fear can push us and how close we came to letting fear destroy wonder. The moon could have been our first victim. Instead, it became our first step. And maybe, when we look at its pale face tonight, we should remember how close we came to erasing it.